I'm training to run a sub 48 second 400, and in this series I document all of my workouts and bring you guys along on the journey so you can see exactly how I progress over time, modify my workouts throughout the year, and hopefully break 48 seconds in the 400. In this video, I have months of 400 meter training with sprinting, lifting, power work, med balls, plyos, and more, and I competed in the 400 in my first ever post-collegiate meet. I started out on a Thursday with a workout of 2 100s and 1 300. I was actually really happy with the times in the 100. Now, of course, these were hand timed, as was the 300, but I was really happy with the times I was getting. I ran 11:76 and then 11:77. And for being by myself, running around the curves of an indoor track as somebody who really struggles with running curves, I was actually really happy with that. And I felt like I was moving really well, especially down the straightaway. I had been using the Huntington activator belt a few days previously, and it felt like I was really feeling the benefits of having done that work while running these reps. Coming into the 300, I got about 200 in and started feeling my legs really dragging, but I pushed through as well as I could and ran a hand-timed 37.01. Now, obviously, who knows exactly what I ran because it was hand-timed, but if that was actually the time that I ran, that's actually a really solid time for me because that's pretty much on pace for a sub 50 400. And the next week, I came out with a workout doing 3 30-meter flies after doing some form work beforehand, and then I did 2 250s. The first one was in 31:47, which roughly translates out to being like a 37.6 second 300. So really not great, not something I was super happy with. And then the second one was a 31:23, which is more like a 37.4. So really, I felt like I should be running faster than this. That's kind of a recurring theme with this whole section of my training. Lots of days I just was not feeling good and I just was not able to put out high quality workouts, at least not as high quality as I was hoping based on the results that I wanted. Then I came out for an explosive lift, doing some step-ups with 225 and then increasing that weight to doing step-ups with 315. I really like doing weighted step-ups. I feel like it's an exercise I'm pretty good at relative to other exercises. And it's always kind of fun to feel yourself fly up off the ground while holding that much weight. I don't think I brought my bar velocity tracker that day, so I don't know what power numbers I was hitting or what times to peak velocity, but it felt like a pretty solid session, and I followed it with some kettlebell swings and then a little bit of upper body training. You can tell I'm definitely not a high jumper, but I was enjoying messing around. And then I came out and I was using the Huntington activator belt to do a lot of different dribbles, doing different styles like left, left, right, right, just alternating normally, repeat left leg, repeat right leg. And the activator belts are one of those things that I really feel like have actually made a difference in my form. I'd highly recommend trying one out if you get the chance. This day I came out to do some 10-meter flies outside and then followed them up with a 300. I was kind of surprised. I actually ended up running a time I was super happy with this day, a 1.011, which is one of the fastest 10-meter flies I've run in a very long time. It's not my PR. My PR is 0.992, I think, which I ran last summer and then immediately got injured because I was doing too much volume, which is really frustrating because I run really fast when I do high volumes. My body just can't handle it, so it's just not something I can do at this point in time. But at the time of filming this video, I was super pumped about seeing a 1.01. I'm just trying to get a workout in, bro. I was expecting the 300 to feel really good because usually when I'm able to sprint fast, I feel great in whatever I'm doing afterward. But for whatever reason, I started running and it just felt like I could not get into my rhythm. Felt rough all the way through, and then when I saw the time afterward, I was very unhappy with it. That 300 was so slow. I've been running faster in the indoor track, and I literally cannot run indoor curves at all. I'm not on a team anymore, obviously, so it's okay for me to not be in great shape, not only have good workouts. I'm training to have fun, and I'm lucky to be out here waiting to get swept away like I'm Dorothy. You can probably tell, look how spooky it is. No tornado though. Would have been a way cooler video with a tornado. So somehow avoided the tornado that was apparently ripping through the town. But then I came out for an acceleration focus session where I did some resisted sprints at varying intensities, and then followed that up with an unresisted sprint and a lift as well. I talk about this pretty frequently, but I really enjoy resisted sprinting, and when I do it consistently, I notice massive results in terms of my actual sprint speed, especially when I do those heavier resisted accelerations. I was also joined in this workout by Coach Markison, who used to coach me back at Bluffton. He looks like he's flying on these acceleration reps, even though he hasn't even been training. You guys know acceleration is a big weak point of mine, and so I would like to do a lot more resisted sprints, but I haven't been doing them as much recently for reasons you'll hear later in the video. We tried to go into the weight room to lift afterward, but they ended up shutting down the power on half of campus because they had to do some electrical repairs. So we ended up going back to the track and doing some stuff with dumbbells and boxes. And I did quite a few drops where I was trying to keep my heel from touching the ground to work on rapid force development in the ankle area. I also mimicked the step-ups I like doing just with dumbbells, so it's obviously a lot lighter than I'm used to, but it was still fun, and I followed it up with some plyometrics as well. This was another speed day, which I started out again with the activator belt. I feel like what I've noticed from using the activator belt is if I use it a day or two before doing a sprint session, it seems to have big benefits for me. But as of now, I haven't actually done it before a sprint session and noticed benefits. So this is an example of a day I did it and then I sprinted afterward and I just didn't feel good. And maybe that's just from fatigue built up throughout the week or the previous training cycle, or a lack of sleep or stress the day of. Or maybe it is fatigue from actually using the belt itself, and maybe it's a modality better used the day before a workout, not the day of. I know Randy Huntington is a pretty big fan of doing two-a-days, so honestly it'd be kind of interesting to experiment around with doing a morning of activator belt session and then following up later that day with an actual sprint session. All stuff I haven't had a chance to experiment with yet, but I would really like to. I believe at this time I started having some Achilles tendon issues again. This is a recurring thing for me, they come and they go. So I was doing some really slow weighted calf raises to try to get blood flowing and try to get my Achilles feeling better. And then I also just did like a light general bodybuilding lift, trying to get my endocrine system firing, releasing stuff like growth hormone and testosterone and getting me recovered and ready to go for the next workout. Then I had a pretty big session, starting out with some foot and ankle work, mostly in the style of Chris Korfist. So I was doing some ankle rockers and a few other things like that. And then I went into another resist acceleration day, starting at a heavy weight over 10 meters, then dropping to a moderate weight over 20 meters, and then a light weight over 30 meters. And then I actually did 2 to 3 10-meter flies, with my intention being that the resist acceleration work would act sort of as potentiation and get me accelerating better, because like I've mentioned, I really have trouble accelerating on certain days. And then I thought I'd go into the flies and run decent times. Now I ran them at 95% effort, but what that translated to was super slow times. I think I was running around like 1.08. So it was really unfortunate, way far off of where I wanted to be. But that'll happen sometime, and it kind of opened my eyes that maybe I'm doing a little too much or need to emphasize my recovery a little bit more. I finished up with some spring ankle, again in the style of Chris Korfist, and then the next day I went in for a lift, and this one I was doing step-ups, but I was alternating between 315 and 225. So I was getting a set with a faster time to peak velocity and then a set with a slower time to peak velocity. I can't remember exactly, but it might have been somewhere south of 200 and then somewhere in the high 200 millisecond TPV. And then I did some unweighted, just trying to see how high I could get up off the ground. I also limited myself to only 4 sets because I thought maybe my lifting was taking too much out of me and I needed some more time for recovery. Thursday that week, I did a ton of extra warming up and foot and ankle stuff because again, I was having some weird Achilles things going on. And I also did quite a bit of things for hip mobility and diaphragmatic activation before I started. And it's interesting, oftentimes when I do the extra stuff for my foot and ankles, even stuff that's intense and you might think would actually cause some soreness or pain to flare up, it'll seem to make the pain in my Achilles better. And I don't exactly know why, but you'll see here I'm doing some pretty intense stuff for my ankles, and I definitely felt better afterward. When I started doing my buildups, I felt very fast. Even when I was running at pretty low intensities, I felt like I was flying. And that translated into the first actual rep that I did. The actual workout was 300s, and I was hoping to run them between 38 seconds and 41 seconds, and that was supposed to be around 85% effort. And the first one, it felt like I was jogging, and I ran 37.68. So I don't know what happened there. It's obviously not a super crazy time, but considering the effort that I was putting in, I was really happy with that time, and it felt like I was just cruising around the track and really popping off my feet. But I had a pre-workout before I did it, and so I literally could not get my heart rate to drop after the first one. My heart was just pounding out of my chest and I felt terrible. So my second one, I ran a 41.07, and I could feel that I was running slowly. I just could not do anything about it. Keep in mind, these reps were hand timed, so you always got to take that with a grain of salt. And I guess I didn't record the second one, but I finished up that session with some spring ankle, and then in my following lift, I actually did some weighted spring ankle because of how much I enjoyed doing the spring ankle the day previous. And I also did some maximal iso holds for my ankles. I think these are super beneficial for athletes, but they can be pretty taxing on the tendons and really take a toll on them. So they're sometimes a little tough to figure out how and when to program them. But I brought my bar velocity tracker, and then I was doing some squat jumps blended with some AFSM jumps I was doing later on. So AFSM is a term from Cal Dietz, which is autogenically facilitated specialized method. But basically it's doing a rapid contraction of the antagonist muscles to make the agonist muscles relax in a movement, and then generally striking the ground and then contracting the agonist muscles as explosively as possible. But generally you get very high intensities, high eccentric velocities, very quick rate of force development. But then I came out with the team to do some 200s with the 400 group. And I'll be honest, they smoked me. They ended up doing 4 reps while I only did 3. And it really goes to show you that there are different types of fit. I had some days recently where I ran some 300s in pretty decent times, but there is a massive difference between running a decent 300 and running 200s at fast speeds with very short recoveries. So on these, I think we were doing 2 or 3 minutes recovery, I think, maybe like 3.5. And my body was just not used to doing that at all. These guys have been doing 200 repeats all year, and they were in much better shape than I was, without a doubt. And they ended up doing 4 reps. I sat out their 3rd rep and then ran the 4th rep to try to push them. But it was definitely humbling to get smoked by my own athletes that I'm helping coach. I'm definitely looking forward to give them a run for their money next year. Following that, I had another very fast lift, brought in the bar velocity tracker, and was doing more of those AFSM squat jumps, and then also some really light step ups, trying to focus on the max velocity range and really get my nervous system firing. I can't exactly remember my reasoning for doing it, but I also started doing a bunch of drop jumps toward the end of the session. Probably wasn't a great idea. I had fun and I didn't have any pain while I was doing it. I guess it's probably not the end of the world. And the next time I came out with Markson, we were messing around with high jump again. You can see that Markson still has great technique from his college days. And then we did some 150s. They were around 80 to 85%, so it was supposed to be intensive tempo. And I actually really enjoy doing 150s for a variety of reasons. Doing them as intensive tempo obviously works, and it's a lot less mentally challenging than doing 200s or 250s or 300s. But also for doing 400 pace work and speed endurance, there's a whole little range of uses for 150s and a bunch that I didn't mention. But especially for 400 guys, 150s are a really nice distance because it's long enough to get a solid stimulus, and depending on your rest times and stuff, even build up some acidity in the muscles. But it's short enough that it never really feels like a big deal. Like if you run a 400 all out, 150 is nothing. And you'll see I actually use 150s a little later in this video as well, but I want to incorporate them quite a lot in my next year of training at all different speeds for all different purposes. Speaking of me doing more 150s, next time I came out for a workout was the exact workout I was just talking about. So my idea with this workout was to do the first two 150s exactly like I would do the opening 150 of a 400 minus blocks, because I think I forgot to bring them with me this day. So the goal for the first 150 was to land somewhere between 17.25 and 18 seconds. And I was also modifying the rest to try to make it more specific to actual 400 meter racing. So after the first one, I rested 15 minutes so that both of the opening ones I was as fresh as possible and it was as similar to the opening of a 400 as possible. And then for all the rest of these, I only rested 5 minutes in between. So it was one 15-minute rest, two 5-minute rests to try to make it so that I was more fatigued for sustaining the pace at the end of the workout. And the end of the workout, I was trying to land between 18.75 and 19.5, which is roughly the pace I should be hitting in the second half of the 400. I really like this workout, and after thinking about it more, I think it'd be really neat to do something like this with 6 150s. So you'd accumulate 900 meters of volume, all of which would be incredibly specific to the 400 because they'd all be at goal pace or faster. And you could do 2 trying to mimic the opening with longer rests, 2 trying to mimic the middle portion with moderate rests, and then 2 trying to mimic the end portion with pretty short rests. So you'd get more and more fatigued as you go, build up more and more acidity in your muscles, and then try to fight through it and maintain those paces. I think it'd be mentally easier than something like 200 repeats or 300s. Probably allow you to get in higher volume than a lot of super specific workouts would, and also mentally not feel that bad because it's just 150s. But as you guys saw, I hit paces on every single rep, and I actually ran faster than I needed to on the closing reps, which is part of why I think having those middle reps in there would be good as well, making it 6 total, because at least with the rest times I was using, I wasn't really fatigued enough for the last couple of reps. After doing this workout though, I was really beaten up the next day, just like sore and tired, just because I hadn't done so much volume at such high speeds in quite a long time. Then this was the week I was actually going to compete in my first and what ended up being my last meet of the entire year. So I did some blocks, but I literally just did them until I had one that felt good, which I ended up getting on my 3rd rep. Didn't feel great, but it felt okay, and then I called it a day. Then I did what I considered to be some race modeling 100s, but it wasn't really race modeling. It was more like tempo, and I was just visualizing the race as I did it and really trying to keep my body in the correct positions, especially around curves, because I struggle with my leg placement and my, I guess, general coordination of going around curves. But this was a pretty low intensity session, just kind of feeling things out, again, visualizing things and getting myself ready for the meet. And then it was time for the meet. So in this race were multiple people who were sub 50, 2 or 3 of whom were sub 48, and then there were a couple like 48s and 49s. But I ended up getting super unlucky with my lane placement. I was lane 1, and then lanes 2 and 3 were empty, and lane 4 was the guy who runs 47. So it was very hard to mentally feel like I was actually part of the race when I could see the massive gap between them and I before we even started. And obviously I know how staggers work, but these guys were way faster than I was, so that was kind of trippy right from the start. And then when the gun went off, I had my worst block start of all time in a race. You can't see it because it's out of camera, but I stumbled and landed with a completely vertical shin for 2 or 3 steps in a row. It easily cost me 1 to 2 seconds. It was really unfortunate. I wish it was on camera just so you guys could see how bad it was, but literally it was atrocious. The only way it could have been worse is if I landed on my face and slid. So not only were there the 2 lanes between me and then the super fast guy, but also I had a bad start, and so I was just pretty much out of the race right from the start, if I'm being honest. It was extra bad because a lot of my athletes were watching me run and probably thinking, geez, this guy is old and washed up. And they were right. Going through the back half of the race, I was doing everything I could to keep pushing because I knew with my rough start, I'd probably have a little energy left over going into the home straight. But this is where the lack of fitness from not doing things like the 200 style repeats with short recovery, or even stuff like intensive tempo 300s, higher volumes of them with shorter recoveries. The lack of doing those things really showed through, and I ran 51.7, which is just pretty embarrassing. I was hoping for a sub 51 or faster. Obviously, I really wanted to get sub 50, but I didn't realistically expect that to happen. I thought I'd be between 49 and 51. And it sucks because if I had just had a decent block start, I probably would have been sub 51 and I would have felt a little better about it. But at the end of the day, this is what happens when you get out of shape. You race slow. I was initially planning to compete in a few more meets, so I came out to try to do some stuff to really specifically target the areas I was struggling with. So the first day was 2x200. The first one I was hoping to run in roughly opening 400 meter pace. The second one in roughly closing 400 meter pace. But for whatever reason, I ran super slow. And then my follow-up rep was closer to what I was hoping for, but it helps that it had a flying start. Then at this point, I decided I actually wasn't going to be racing anymore because I didn't think it was worth spending the money when I knew I wasn't in shape and I could just take some time and reset my season. So I took a couple weeks to just do some stuff that I thought was fun before jumping back into hard training again. So after doing some hurdles, and let me know if I should be a 400-meter hurdler, I did some plyos, pretty much just messing around and trying some stuff I hadn't done before. I was having some issues with slipping around in my socks in the turf though. And then I did some block stuff. I ended up losing the recording, so I didn't get to show a lot of my block stuff, but I did a lot of blocks and actually ended up with the block positioning I was really happy with. And then I ran a 100-meter, roughly speaking, all out, but I didn't time it. I was just really trying to work on my start and my transition. What's up, y'all? Just got back from a 2-week break. At this point, being unhappy with how things ended at the end of the last season, I was determined to get on the grind, and I had a giant session planned out. I had quite a few days of giant sessions, actually. My main day workouts were taking me about 3 hours to get through, and my lighter day workouts were taking me 1.5 to 2 hours to get through, so I was absolutely grinding. I started out a lot of my sessions with form work using the activator belt, and then following it up with a lot of Chris Korfist drills. So I was doing some stuff working on ankle rocker stuff, trying to get low shin angles and drive out horizontally. And I also did spring ankle, which I didn't show here. And then I was doing some really heavy resisted sprints. So these were with 135 pounds. And I was doing a 10-meter sprint with 1 minute recovery 3 times. And then I would take a set recovery of about 3 minutes, and then I would do that all over again. So these were pretty short recoveries, which is intentional. That's something I got from Les Spellman. That's typically how he runs his sessions when he's focusing on the peak power range, which is what I was doing here. It was 50 to 60% velocity decrement. And then I did 1 acceleration and 1 set of extensive bounding, which I really need to work on my bounding. Came back then for extensive tempo and med ball throws and then ankle work. So basically a general day, functioning as recovery, and then also touching on aerobic capacity, and obviously a little bit of explosive stuff with the med balls, but it's not a super high intensity session. I really enjoy doing extensive tempo. I like how it makes me feel, and I like feeling like I'm working on my fitness, and also getting in those extra ground contacts. Like I mentioned before, high volumes of training work really well for me when I don't get injured, which a little bit of foreshadowing here. I always get injured when I do high volume training. But I finished it off with a little core circuit, working on different aspects of my core, and also a little bit of adductor and abductor work for my hips. And then it was time for my next big session. The next big session was actually the exact same as the previous one that I showed you because I ended up having to take a week off. So the same resisted sprints, heavy, the same plyos, all that stuff. And I just recorded some of the stuff that I wasn't able to record the first day. So some extensive plyos and also some double jumps on a box. I was basically doing these to mimic what you might do for stadium stair hops because I just didn't have any stadium stairs inside. And then I went in for a lift on that same day. At this point, I started trying to learn how to power clean, but I was really bad at it and hadn't even watched any videos on technique. I've been taught before, but I never really learned how to do it. So I was just feeling my way through using some relatively light weights. This is 135, and just trying to figure out how to move my body, how to avoid hurting myself, and try to learn a new lift. Now in a lot of these clips, it looks like my lower back is slightly rounded. It really didn't feel like it was, but it's something I worked on moving forward because I was a little nervous about it. And I also didn't want you guys to give me a bunch of grief about my poor back positioning. I think those are 10s, so there I might have hit 155 for the first time. And I hit it again afterward, but you can see my catch is really terrible. I'm not good at dropping down and receiving the bar. It's rough times, but I followed it up with some pretty high repetition squats and then some posterior chain exercises, especially focusing on the glutes and hamstrings. Also did some upper body work. It's always good to be strong across your entire body. And this day I came out for some hill runs. So I started with some 20-meter hill sprints, But I wore my barefoot shoes because I was like, oh, I'll be running in grass. It's a good idea to wear my barefoot shoes, really strengthen my feet. What I didn't know is that it was going to rain earlier that day, so the grass was incredibly slippery, and I could not get any traction, and it was probably one of the least effective workouts I've done in a while. I was then doing some long hill repeats in the style of Mike Hurst, but again, I was in barefoot shoes in the grass, just slipping and sliding all over the place. My watch was also being kind of funny, so I couldn't even tell quite where 300 meters were, and I tried to move over and run them on the road after I ran it in the grass, but then I was having some Achilles pain. So I'll be honest, this session overall was a bit of a mess. I don't feel like I got much out of it other than making my tendons hurt. I went in for a lift afterward. I tried to do some snatches, but they really did not feel good, and I was not enjoying it, and so I ended up doing some RDL and a couple other things afterward. I couldn't record most of the lift because there were a couple people in there and I didn't want them looking at me funny. But then I had another big session, this time doing some 200-meter repeats. By the way, this is a vibrating platform. If you have tight feet, calves, and ankle regions like I do, this thing is literally a godsend. It feels like doing a 20-minute warm-up and it takes 60 seconds. You can't quite see it because the frame rate of the camera, but it buzzes like crazy. Again, I did quite a bit of foot and ankle work in the style of Chris Corfist, doing some ankle rockers and then some ankle rocker calf raises. Here you can see me hooking up my activator belt, and then I did another little activator belt session before my 200s. If my pants fall down while I'm doing this, y'all are gonna get a front row seat. It'll be the start of my OnlyFans career. Now the 200s were really high volume. I think I did 14 of them, which you might be thinking, that's insane, you're gonna get injured. And I do. However, I was doing it on a mix of some stuff I've learned from a few different people, and I do genuinely think it's an effective way to start building the capacity to do, for example, 5 or 6 fast 200s like I couldn't do earlier in this video. But like with everything, you have to build up to it intelligently and slowly. At this point, I'm throwing on my barefoot shoes, and then I'm getting ready to go outside to do my extensive tempo. So again, 14 by 200. I'm gonna be doing these with 2 minutes of rest. So it's quite a bit of rest, especially compared to the stuff I've been doing recently. The tempo I did on Tuesday was 30 seconds rest between hundreds and 60 seconds rest between sets. So this should honestly feel pretty good. And the reason I'm wearing barefoot shoes is to try to help with the foot strengthening effect. Wearing regular shoes really limits what your feet can do, and it can kind of restrict things like your pronation and stuff like that, and also reduces the amount of work that the arch of your foot has to do. A huge focus of the stuff I've been doing, the spring ankle, the ankle rockers, is to increase the strength of my arch, and generally speaking, my foot and my ankle. I think that's a big weak point for me, and so it's something I'm hitting on as hard as I possibly can this year. So the barefoot shoes will help me do that, and because I'm in the grass, should be pretty safe to be wearing barefoot shoes. The 200s were actually a lot harder than I was expecting. It was a lot of rest compared to most of the stuff I've been doing recently, but it was also quite a bit more distance than a lot of stuff I've been doing recently. So after just the first few reps, it started getting hard, which I used to do distance running, if a lot of you don't know. And the thing with aerobic stuff is it often starts being hard super early, and then it just continues being really hard the whole time. Well, I shouldn't say really hard, but like it's moderately hard just the entire time, nonstop. And it was kind of a similar feeling doing this, and a similar feeling when doing extensive tempo work. Now, of course, it was a little bit anaerobic, a little bit aerobic, so it made it a step up from the extensive tempo I did earlier that week. If you have patellar tendonitis or tendinopathy like I do, I would highly recommend putting your shoulders far enough in front of the bar that you don't slam the bar into your patellar tendon. Anyway, this high day was exactly the same as the last resisted sprint high day that I'd done twice now in this video. And these were just the sprints and then the extensive bounding that I did afterward. This was later another extensive tempo day. So this was a 6x3x100, I believe. So 18 100s or 1800 meters of extensive tempo volume. And then this day I came out to try to do some more resisted sprints. Last week my Achilleses both started acting up pretty hard. That's pretty typical for me. It's probably because, once again, during my off time, I wasn't doing enough to stimulate it, and so I wasn't active enough, didn't do enough ISOs, that sort of stuff, so it's acting up again. Super frustrating. So this is the plan. Then I yapped about my plan for the session. I basically said I was going to try to do some ISOs to make it not hurt for the session. But if I do it and I can't get through the workout because it hurts too badly, this week is going to turn into another deload week, just like last week, and the whole week's just going to be spent doing isometrics. I'm really hoping after I do the ISOs that the pain will go down enough I can do this workout. Do you guys think that the pain went down enough that I could do the workout? Anyway, here I was doing some screwdriver internal rotation drills, and then some other windshield wiper and external internal rotation drills and some spring ankle stuff, and then I did weighted ISOs. Ooh. Bad news. Hurt a little bit while I was doing it. Hurt a lot the second I stopped. A big lot. It's finally starting to subside a little bit, so that's good. But I probably shouldn't do anymore, so that sucks. But this is going to turn into another deload week. So realistically, I have to try to keep myself healthy, so gotta do what I gotta do. Yeah, this sucks. You guys know I've been dealing with these issues for years now. In high school, I had Achilles issues. I had tendonitis for a long time, and then it sort of went away for a while, and it's started coming back as I was in college and everything. So all of that probably because I haven't taken 2 to 4 weeks to just sit down and fix it. So that's what I'm going to do now.